many residents, this week's economic statement offered little to Newcastle and the Hunter Valley. The disappointment of honeysuckle not being mentioned further reinforced the feeling that when it comes to the crunch, Newcastle misses out. This, according to the Federal Minister for Land Transport, Bob Brown, is the Newcastle cringe.
There are plenty of runs on the board for the Newcastle and Hunter Valley region, and yet there tends to be on occasion some people in the community who sit back and think to themselves, apparently, well, we can't do it. What we've got to do is depend on handouts.
Mr Brown believes the region doesn't need to rely on a helping hand.
We are the powerhouse of New South Wales. We are the major coal exporting port in New South Wales. We've got the steel industry.
Our energy powerhouse, Mr Brown believes, has the opportunity to become a major contributor to the national electricity grid. So where is the region going wrong? Mr Brown says it's certainly not the politicians' fault.
State colleagues, people in local government, people in Newcastle and the Hunter region really are very well served by their public representatives.
He believes the problem lies within our economic and business structure. For example, Mr Brown suggests we need to become more competitive and forget losing the frigates and submarine contracts. The key, according to Mr Brown, is a change in attitude.
When you're assertive, when you're mature, when you know you can do things yourself, that's when you lose that cringe.
So you're saying Newcastle lacks a bit of maturity?
Oh yes, it does.
Mr Brown says the region has the ability and talent to achieve this, but it'll take a combined effort from the community and business sector to better sell ourselves. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
It's been a fast and furious introduction to big-time soccer, not only for Bruce Dale's Warriors on the field, but for the Breakers in general. From the announcement last May that they had been accepted to represent Newcastle in the NSL,
Do you think we're in?
to the start of construction on the new grandstand, completion time 12 weeks, achieved ahead of schedule, to October the 4th, and a proud moment as Andy Koska led the Breakers out onto the playing surface for the first time. While Mitre 10 Stadium is already one of the best facilities in the NSL, it is set to become even better. Today, the Federal Sports Minister Ros Kelly announced a $250,000 grant to provide covered seating on the western side of the complex for around 1,500, that will also incorporate a canteen, an area for disabled supporters, toilets and new press and television boxes.
And the reason we're giving it is because they've done so much themselves, and the BHP Breakers are a great team, and I wish them all the best as they go into the league.
For General Manager Dave Maguire, the grant's nearly as good as a premiership.
Well, the National Soccer League consider us now to be one of the top venues in the National League, and this can only enhance our situation.
While everyone is delighted with the Breakers' good fortune, serious questions are still being asked about Newcastle's #1 sports ground. A sad sight since the earthquake, but a timely answer to much needed assistance may only be a fortnight away.
It is taking time, and I'm a little bit annoyed that it's taken so long, but it's with the state and federal government and disaster recovery funds, and I'm confident it will come through. We've given them enough time now. We want some results.
Late this afternoon, Chief Executive of the Newcastle Knights, Mike Armstrong, indicated that they will also be looking towards the federal government for assistance out Broadmeadow Way. For the Breakers, a win over Heidelberg in Melbourne this weekend would be the icing on the cake.
Police completed the operation late last night, arresting and charging 3 men with supplying half a kilo of speed in Newcastle's West End. 3 more men were charged with taking part in the manufacture of 16 kilos of speed with an estimated street value of more than $1.5 million. Arrests in the suburbs of Cardiff and Fennell Bay also uncovered an arsenal of illegal weapons, including rifles, target pistols and a banned gas-powered pistol. The arrest resulted from collaboration between Sydney's Drug Enforcement Agency and Newcastle Drug Squad detectives after weeks of investigation.
We believe that we've broken up a fairly major distribution organisation of amphetamine in Newcastle district.
The operation occurred on the eve of the introduction of new government legislation obliging pharmaceutical companies to provide records of bulk chemical sales. The DEA says the new laws will give them information on how much legal product is disappearing into illegal drug factories. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
An early dip in the McIntyre sorted the men from the boys as the twisting course of 600 metres proved more difficult than most expected. Emerging from the water first and with a clear lead was Chris Doherty, and as he prepared to head out on the cycle leg, was really throwing down the gauntlet to the rest of the opposition. The perfect conditions allowed for a fast pace, but again the triathletes found the second leg quite demanding, with a few hills, the odd semi-trailer and plenty of cars making it tough. Concentration being of paramount importance. Doherty maintained his lead as he came in to change into his joggers and start the run leg. Tracy Carter was holding a handy lead in the ladies and was giving some of the men a few headaches as well. But there was no doubt about the winner, Doherty. He powered home to grab the cash and he was delighted.
I was very happy with my performance today. I had a bit of a problem in Wollongong a few weeks ago and was a little bit worried about my form, but today I felt much better.
Tracy Carter dominated the women's event to record a fine win, and all competitors gave the Inverell Triathlon the big thumbs up. "54 recreational off-road vehicles ranging from up to 1,200cc capacities to the new single-seater 6-litre division were battling for honours in the first round of the East Coast Tri Challenge, and this weekend some of the nation's best drivers and cars were on show and in top form. Yesterday no less than 4 class records were set on a course that was conducive to brilliant times. But today, however, with a mixture of dirt, oil and water, the times were considerably slower, with driving conditions quite difficult. Class 1 is the Premier Division, and it was a win for Sydney driver Cliff Alderton in the 165. Alderton was pushed for a while, but his superior skill saw him take out Class 1 and the outright point score championship. In second spot was the owner of the track, Murray Fuller, in 1.313, and a bit of local knowledge was a handy weapon for Fuller. Just behind Alderton and Fuller was Jeff Bryant, and his off-roader provided plenty of highlights and is one to watch in the future. The next round of the Tri Challenge will be held in Newcastle during March.
The Armidale North Rotary Club came up with a novel way to raise money for people who have Alzheimer's disease. The club decided to build a house and donate the profit to the ACE Appeal. Last year it bought land on the corner of Judith and Thompson Streets in Armidale for $40,000. The local building community did the rest. Everything was donated: bricks, mortar, tiles, fittings and furniture. Yesterday the fundraisers were supposed to realise a profit. Unfortunately, the bidding at the auction didn't reach the reserve price of $145,000. There were only 2 bids, one at $120,000 and another at $125,000.
Naturally very disappointed. We thought with all the encouraging reports we'd had on the place from the over 1,200 people who had visited it, that we would at least get 1 or 2 bidders on the day. And we were looking forward to saying yesterday we would have sold it, and saying that we'd be able to give the ACE Appeal a lot of money.
Phil McCann is confident the property will be sold in the next couple of weeks. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The sight of the black conning tower down by the water proved an irresistible draw card for hundreds of sightseers strolling along the foreshores and docks of Newcastle Port. Within minutes of throwing open their hatches to public inspection, the crew of the Otway had their hands full, guarding curious visitors in one end of the sub and out the other. The Otway arrived in Newcastle yesterday morning to give its crews some well-earned shore leave and to fly the flag in one of its occasional ports of call. Inspections were strictly no-camera affairs for security reasons. The Otway will remain in port until Wednesday. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
While not enjoying the wide-ranging popularity of the Rugby Code 7-a-side promotions, the Port Macquarie Soccer Club's annual 6-a-side tournament has steadily grown in support over the last 10 years. Just as demanding as the other forms of football that play limited numbers competitions, 6-on-6 soccer outdoors provides a fast and furious spectacle. Yesterday, 23 men's and 9 ladies' teams battled for the money that was up for grabs, and in the men's final it was a win for Lismore Workers, who defeated Pacific Palms 3-2 in the decider. And the ladies was a win for local lasses from the Port United Club, and they were a little too strong for North Coffs Harbour, also a scoreline of 3-2.
The original club building, constructed in the early 70s, was such a futuristic design, its attractiveness has remained. But in recent times, the interior is beginning to show signs of wear and tear. It won't be just a spring clean either. The club will be opened up with a bigger reception area, new fire escapes, a new section overlooking the golf course, and better bar and bistro facilities for the 7,800 members. Much needed is a new kitchen dedicated to the heavily used auditorium, the biggest in Foster.
The main kitchen has to supply the food for that area, and it's quite a distance from the auditorium. The new extensions will contain a holding kitchen to overcome that problem.
The original building firm, Painter Dixon, has been re-engaged, and work will start this month once final plans are approved, with a completion date set for October. $3.154 million will be spent despite the tight economic times.
Fortunately, we managed to trade right throughout the year very successfully. There are peaks and there are troughs, but even during the winter season we do enjoy some quite good trading periods.
But the club has had to pull its horns in a little. It had wanted to spend another $2.5 million, 5.6 all up, on an even bigger development.
Originally it was intended to build a motel in the recreation area adjacent to the club. Unfortunately, with the present climate, the club did not wish to go into too much debt, and that has been curtailed at this stage.
Last night's meeting, attended by more than 100 people, was the latest round in a series of pickets, petitions and protests against the government's hospital proposal. Groups opposed to the plan had called on the council to run a poll, which they believed would reflect the community's attitude that public health care was in jeopardy at Port Macquarie. Council rejected the idea because it would have cost about $60,000. Instead, it tabled the findings of an independent survey carried out by a newspaper. 70% of those asked were against the privately built and run hospital. Head of the Hospital Action Group, Don Murphy, said he was bitterly disappointed at what he saw was a failed democratic process, and said that police presence at the meeting was unnecessary. Meanwhile, Health Minister John Hannaford remains committed to the privatisation plan, which would see the hospital built for $40 million, half the cost estimated for a public works construction. The project is expected to be completed by late next year. The government will distribute a pamphlet within the next 2 weeks, explaining the benefits of the new hospital's function.
The Coffs Harbour Chamber of Commerce and Industry invited Jeremy Williams to air his views about the economic statement at a luncheon today. Aside from gaining an informed opinion on the government's policies, the Chamber hopes this sort of function will forge strong links between UNE's Coffs Harbour campus and the business community. And local business people certainly showed a keen interest in proceedings as Mr Williams explained the ways in which he believes the government's policies will be good for the area.
The package that the government's putting up for the tourism industry is obviously very encouraging. The money they're giving to the Australian Tourist Commission and the Department of Tourism, that money is going to be pumped into the local economy in one way or another.
Mr Williams believes there will be even more widespread benefits for locals.
There are now some pretty generous tax breaks for small businesses in the area, and I think this could be one way in which we can engender a bit of business confidence again, much needed business confidence in my opinion.
But he says people shouldn't expect immediate results.
I'm not saying for a minute there's going to be instantaneous. It's a step in the right direction, and I think we ought to view it with cautious optimism.
Neighbourhood First Aid is a program similar to the Safe House scheme, giving passers-by a recognised centre for competent and reliable help.
We'll have first aid stations identified by a sign out the front, and people will know that help is available there.
The concept has the support of the Red Cross and St John's Ambulance, but will still be run on an independent basis. All members in the program would have special first aid skills and carry basic medical supplies.
The first 3 minutes after the onset of a major trauma is vital, but in that time a life can be saved.
A program is already up and running in South Australia, and organisers are hoping the idea will have similar success in the Hunter. It's envisaged every suburban street could have a neighbourhood first aid house, giving basic treatment and simple first aid advice. It's believed the scheme would have special benefits for the elderly, but Neighbourhood First Aid doesn't want to interfere with normal ambulance work. The plan is only to give an additional service before the professionals take over. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
In 1962, the average weekly wage was about £17 or $34. Most people got married in their early 20s, and if you owned a radio or television set, you had to apply to the government for a licence. 30 years ago tonight, NBN Television was on air.
It gives me very great pleasure now to declare station NBN Channel 3 in Newcastle officially open.
6 p.m, March the 4th, 1962. And Channel 3 was on the air.
For the first time, television in Newcastle and the Hunter had a face of its own, with NBN personalities becoming household names. The station's flagship was its news, anchored by Murray Finlay.
In Honolulu, the presidential talks on Vietnam are now underway.
It's one small step for man.
Well, may we say,
save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
World, national and local events have been brought into the lounge room for the past 3 decades. NBN became part of the community, capturing Novocastrians at work and at play. A generation of youngsters has grown up with Swallows Juniors, Romper Room and Saturday Date, and a taste of Australian-produced drama and variety.
Whiplash, whiplash, whiplash.
NBN has always done things in a big way. 3 circus elephants were once brought into the studios. Things didn't always go smoothly. The 1970s saw an expansion of the studios, the introduction of colour TV and the beginning of a series of successful telethons. NBN News captured the Signora ground, the Star Riot and kept the city and the world informed during the Newcastle earthquake. All enduring images of the station's 30 years of broadcasting.
The Building Owners and Managers Association report is based on a survey of office space in Newcastle. According to the report launched today, the city has an office vacancy rate of 10.05%. And according to the experts, that's good news for Newcastle.
People want to invest in buildings that they know they can get tenants for, and this report says that particularly in the modern accommodation in Newcastle they can get tenants. Those buildings have a very high occupancy rate compared to almost every other area in Australia.
Previously, Newcastle has suffered as a commercial investment centre. With no accurate assessment of office space, there's been no way to compare Newcastle's investment potential with other cities. But now investors have a benchmark.
What this does is give all investment areas an independent assessment of where the city's going commercially in terms of commercial office space, and as I said, it's a very valuable tool for Newcastle and one it hasn't had before, but it will have every year from now on.
No, it's not the America's Cup, it's the family raft race to raise money for the local football team. It's the first time the Wingham Tigers have held the Family Fun Day, and by all accounts it was a huge success. But competition was fierce and feisty. In fact, every dirty trick in the book was used to win the event. Some so desperate to get that winning edge that they'd try anything. And Vic Meats took out the race, while back in the field, not coming in last was all that mattered. Organisers have praised the level of support from the community and say it will become an annual event.
Today it was a cast-off 12-tonne tumble mill in a city scrapyard. In December '89, the airbags could have been useful in lifting the collapsed floors of the Newcastle Workers' Club. At $8,000 for the kit, the bags are a relatively cheap addition to the Fire Brigade's Rescue Salvage Unit based in Newcastle. As part of the brigade's upgrading for primary emergency response, officers are being trained in all aspects of rescue work. The bags are made of acid-resistant rubber, are inflated by portable air bottles, the same used for backpack breathing apparatus, and are capable of lifting 16-tonne weights a metre off the ground.
They're very good on unstable ground or marshy surfaces. They're very good for the quick and ease of operation.
Smaller, high-pressure, rapid inflation bags are capable of lifting up to 40 tonnes. The bags have also been used for raising submerged boats and cars and are now standard issue for metropolitan rescue units. The dockyard provided thousands of jobs and launched more than 100 ships before its fabrication sheds fell silent in the 1980s. Hopes for a shipbuilding resurgence passed the city by with failed bids to build submarines and frigates for the Navy. The steel skeleton of the yard is now being dismantled, making way for the planned Hunter Port Authority's general cargo facility. A master plan for the site was completed last December, and the authority has called for tenders for the design, drainage and sealing of part of the area. The Port Authority is consolidating its interests to the northern side of the harbour basin, and it's hoped work on the former dockyard site will begin by late May. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
Sailing Beechwood Homes 2, Brundages was in devastating form to record one of the most emphatic victories in the history of the Australian 16-foot skiff sprint series. Already with the Australian long course title to his name and the New South Wales crown, Brundages and his crew of Scott Sherry and Andrew Buchan sailed on 8 occasions on the weekend for 8 brilliant victories. It was a big weekend for the Belmont Club. Alan Cummings skippered MJH to second place, and John Millwood, also of Belmont, sailed Castrian Homes to third position.
How big would this have been if they had one?
Very nice. Yes.
$1,600 a month.
For the second time in as many days, Newcastle's government buses were off the road for 4 hours from 10 this morning. More than 200 drivers met to consider the call by State Transit Chief Executive John Brew for a major overhaul of the Newcastle workplace. Mr Brew says for Newcastle buses to be in with a chance to win the government contract for routes after July, $5.7 million in operating costs have to be cut. The State Transit head has proposed the formation of a committee, including the unions, to look at where costs can be shaved. The drivers' representative has said yes to joining the committee, but as for the massive budget cut...
Simple answer to it is no. $13,900 per employee is just a joke. The members are quite adamant they're not prepared to go to that sort of extent to save their jobs, and it's going to be quite interesting to see where we go from here.
At yesterday's meeting between management and the workforce, Mr Brew was critical of what he called the rorting of sick leave.
Newcastle buses has 50% more absenteeism than Sydney buses and about twice the public sector, the private companies. Now why would that be so? The people of New South Wales can't be asked to pay for that kind of rort any longer.
Mr Winwood denies the assertion, saying the drivers comply with sick leave entitlements. While the union believes privatisation is inevitable for Newcastle bus routes, the drivers won't be taking the vehicles off the road in protest. Instead, they'll push their case through a publicity campaign.
We intend to focus on the independent seats in Sydney, which are held by Clover Moore and Peter McDonald in government bus areas, and any shaky government seats that are in government bus areas also.
For 80,000 students in the Hunter, school's out around 3 o'clock. But if a submission to a federal parliamentary committee by the Institute of Criminology is taken up, the pupils will be working 9 to 5. The Institute's John Walker says with the number of two-income families in the community today, many students come home to no one, and that can lead to the temptation of crime. Mr Walker says if the pupils stay at school for an extra 2 hours, they'll be supervised, and the lessons learned won't be the illegal kind. It's a proposal welcomed by the Hunter Region's Head of School Education, Alan Beard.
I can only think that giving children more and better activities to fill their time in productive ways would be a positive contribution to reducing the amount of crime.
Not so keen are the Teachers Federation, who says its members already have enough on their plate, and the students themselves.
People are happy to come here, but once the day's finished, they're relieved, and any more would pretty much see an uproar, I'd say.
Mr Walker says the proposal has long-term benefits for the students. He says those extra 2 hours a day could be used to teach job and life skills, so vital once the lessons in the classroom are over for good. Newcastle Police say the proposal has merit, but only goes part way to addressing teenage crime.
There are greater issues other than just being at school for an extra 2 hours. We'd be looking at also the fact is that the crimes committed by children aren't necessarily between 3 and 5 in the afternoon.
The students agree.
If a kid wants to go out and commit the crime, and he'll wait until after school, no matter how late you've got school on, and he'll find a way to do it.
Mississippi and Alabama were hardest hit, but storms also struck in Texas, Arkansas, Nebraska, Colorado and Wyoming. 3 women were killed and 42 people injured, 4 of them critically, in the small town of Zero in Mississippi when a tornado struck. In Hale County, Alabama, a child and an elderly woman were killed in the storms. Another man died when his car crashed into a fallen tree.
Everything just blew up. You know, I didn't really hear the wind. It just sounded like a big explosion, and glass and debris started flying.
Winds of up to 150 kilometres an hour have wreaked havoc in Lake Providence, Mississippi, and a storm damaged as many as 100 homes and 12 businesses in El Dorado, Arkansas.